Welcome to our deep dive today. We're tackling this article from the Leadership Quarterly that you sent us. A fatal flaw. Positive leadership style research creates causal illusions. I mean, the title alone, right?
It really grabs your attention.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's going on with all this talk about, feel-good leadership.
Right, exactly. It's a pretty deep critique of how we study leadership, especially these positive leadership styles. Authentic leadership, ethical leadership, servant leadership.
So for those who maybe haven't encountered those terms before, basically we're talking about leaders who are seen as genuine and moral, focused on serving others.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Okay, so the article goes on to claim there's this fatal flaw in how we research these styles. I mean, that sounds kind of dramatic.
It does, doesn't it?
What is the problem they're pointing out?
Well, the main argument is this. A lot of research on leadership styles kind of treats them as if they're all about what a leader does, their behaviors.
Yeah.
But the article says, wait a minute, it's not that simple. These leadership styles, they're actually a mix of behaviors and how those behaviors are perceived by the people who are following that leader.
So it's not just about what a leader does, but also how their actions are interpreted by their team.
Exactly. And this is where it gets tricky because the same behavior, the exact same thing a leader does, it can be seen in completely different ways, depending on, who's doing the observing and what their own biases might be.
Right.
And that's what the article calls a causal illusion. So it might look like a leader's style is causing a certain outcome, like maybe their team is really high performing.
Okay.
But it could just be an illusion created by how people are already perceiving that leader.
Okay, I think I'm getting that. But can you give me an example? Like, how would this actually play out in a real workplace?
Sure. So imagine two leaders who both decide to take a pay cut so their company can avoid layoffs, during tough economic times.
Okay.
One leader, they've got this history of being very people-focused, very supportive.
The other leader, they've got this reputation for being more, aloof maybe, more focused on just the bottom line.
Got it.
Even though they're making the same sacrifice, taking a pay cut, people are going to interpret it differently.
Right, totally.
The first leader, people might see that as genuinely selfless, like, wow, they really care about us. And it reinforces their image as an authentic leader, a servant leader.
Yeah.
But that second leader, even though they're doing the same thing,
it's going to be seen in a totally different light.
Exactly. Like, oh, are they just doing this to avoid bad press?
Right.
Or to get us to work harder? You see how the same action can have drastically different perceptions.
That is such a good example. It really highlights how much our existing opinions about a leader can really color how we see their actions, even when those actions seem, on the surface like positive actions.
It's really powerful, and that's exactly the problem these researchers are getting at.
Yeah. Those interpretations, those causal illusions, they can really mess up research findings. Like, you might see a study that says, oh, authentic leadership is linked to better team performance.
Right.
But is it really the leader's authenticity that's driving that performance? Or is it that people just perceive them as authentic and therefore work harder?
Right, like because of that perception.
Exactly. And it becomes almost impossible to really tease those two things apart.
Okay, so this article is basically raising a big red flag about how we study leadership. They're not just pointing fingers though, right? Like, what do they actually say we should be doing about it?
Well, that's what I find so interesting about this article. They actually propose some really specific ways to move forward, and they test their ideas with some fascinating experiments.
Oh, I love a good experiment. So tell me, how do they go about actually demonstrating these causal illusions at work? Like, what did these experiments actually look like?
Well, they did a few different things. In one experiment, they showed participants videos of the same leader, but here's the catch. Some of the participants, they were told that this leader had a history of being really successful, while others were told that, this leader had kind of a track record of failure.
Okay, interesting. So they set the stage, right, by influencing people's perceptions going in. What happened? Does it actually change how people viewed the leader?
It totally did. The people who were told the leader was successful, they rated that leader much higher on all those positive leadership styles, authentic, ethical, servant, even though they were watching the exact same video as everyone else.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like we all have these built-in leadership filters or something,
Yeah, I like that.
Just knowing a little bit about someone's past can completely change how we see them in the present.
It's fascinating, right? And that was just one of the experiments. They really went all out to show how these causal illusions can pop up, sometimes in really unexpected ways.
Just wild how much a little bit of background information can change our whole view of a leader. What other causal illusions did these researchers find in their work?
Oh, there's one that really stuck with me. Involved a speech, right, about supporting a charity. They showed this video to people, a leader giving this speech. And just like before, they kind of messed with what people knew about the leader's past performance.
Yeah.
Some were told, oh, this leader, their team always exceeds expectations, top performers. Others were told, yeah, this leader, their team, well, they kind of struggle to meet those same expectations.
Got it. So they're priming people again, right, with different info about the leader. But what about the speech itself? Was it like the kind of speech that you'd typically see as authentic or ethical?
Yeah. The leader in the video, they were very much doing those things you'd associate with positive leadership, talking about teamwork, helping others, really trying to rally everyone around this cause.
And just to remind me, what were those 4 propositions they were testing?
Right. So the first one was that these positive leadership styles, like authentic leadership, ethical servant leadership, they're influenced by things other than just the leader's behavior.
Right, so their past performance, their reputation, maybe even if people just like them personally.
Exactly. And then the second proposition, that was whether those leadership style ratings, how people perceive the leader, actually lead to different outcomes, even if those ratings aren't really based on what the leader is doing.
So basically, do those causal illusions actually have a real impact?
That's the question.
And in this experiment with the charity speech, what did they find? Like, did those preconceived notions about the leader affect how people responded to their message?
Yeah, it totally did. So the participants, those who believed the leader had that history of success, right? They rated the leader way higher on authenticity, ethical leadership, servant leadership, all compared to the people who'd been told, well, this leader's team, not so successful.
Even though everyone saw the same speech, the same behaviors.
The same exact video. And it wasn't just about filling out a survey, right? They actually wanted to see if those perceptions translated into action.
Okay.
So after the video, the participants, they had a chance to actually donate some of their earnings from the study to the charity the leader was talking about.
So they weren't just measuring opinions, they were measuring behavior too, what'd they find?
Those who'd given the leader high ratings on those positive styles, remember, based on nothing but that pre-info about past performance, those people, they were significantly more likely to donate.
So it looks like being seen as an authentic leader is leading to more donations, but the researchers are saying, no, that might be that causal illusion again.
Yeah. The real driver, the real reason those people donate more, it might just be that racial belief about the leader's success, which then colors everything else they see and do.
Oh man, starting to see how messy this all gets. Like, we think we're judging leaders based on their actions, but it's like our brains are cutting corners all the time,
Right.
using assumptions and these preconceived ideas to fill in the gaps. Did they find similar stuff in those other experiments?
Oh, yeah. Remember that one where people read a speech, same speech, but some were told it was George W. Bush and others were told it was Bill Clinton?
Oh yeah, that one blew my mind. Like, can our political leanings really affect how we see leadership, especially if we're reading the same exact words?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
So those participants who considered themselves conservative, they rated George W. Bush, this supposed speaker, they rated him way higher on authenticity, ethical leadership, all of it, compared to those who thought it was a Clinton speech. And of course, the opposite was true for liberal participants. Clinton was the more positive leader for them.
So it's not even about the content of the speech itself, but who you think is giving it.
Yeah, pretty wild, right? And just like before, those perceptions, they actually led to different actions. So conservative folks, they were more likely to donate to Bush's charity, while liberals were more likely to donate to Clinton's.
Okay, I need a minute to process this. This brings us to their third proposition, that essentially what we think of as effective leadership, it might actually be more about the person doing the judging than the leader themselves.
Yeah, some people are just naturally more positive about leaders. They give them the benefit of the doubt, while others are more skeptical no matter what the leader does.
So even if we could perfectly measure a leader's behavior, we'd still be dealing with the fact that everyone has their own leadership judgment meter going on in their heads.
Totally. And those meters, they're built from all sorts of experiences, right? Past leaders you've known, your culture, maybe even your personality. It gets really complex.
Okay, so those first 3 experiments, They really focused on how things other than a leader's behavior can create these causal illusions. But what about the behaviors themselves? Didn't they try to, like, directly manipulate those too?
Yeah, they did. Their fourth, the last experiment, that was all about that. They wanted to see if you directly change a leader's actions to be more ethical, would that have a stronger effect than all those other, perception-based factors?
Okay, so this time, they weren't just changing the information about the leader. They were changing what the leader actually did in the video.
Exactly. Two versions of a video, a leader explaining a task. In one version, the leader was all about ethics, be honest, follow the rules, do the right thing. The other version, the leader was more neutral, just explaining the task. No big emphasis on ethics.
Okay, got it. So this time, there was a difference in what the leader was actually doing. What happened? Did that finally get rid of those causal illusions?
Well, here's the interesting thing. Even when they made those ethical actions clear, they still found that a lot of the link between leadership styles and the outcome, this time it was whether people lied on a task later. A lot of that was still driven by those individual tendencies of the people doing the rating.
You mean, like, some people are just more trusting, more likely to give leaders a break, and others are more suspicious no matter what?
Exactly. And those tendencies, they seem to be pretty deep-seated, It suggests that even when a leader tries to behave ethically, they're still going to be seen through that lens of individual perception.
Whoa, kind of unsettling, to be honest. Thinking about how much of our judgments about leaders might have nothing to do with what they're actually doing. This article has really, I don't know, got me thinking about leadership in a whole new way. It's kind of, I guess, humbling to realize how much our own perceptions, our biases, all that, it plays into how we judge leaders, even when we think we're being totally objective. So where do we go from here? Like, after dropping this knowledge bomb, what did these researchers say we should do?
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. They do offer some, I think, really practical ideas for, improving how we do research on leadership, getting closer to what really makes a difference.
Okay, I'm ready for some solutions. What do they suggest?
One big thing is to shift our focus. So instead of those big, broad leadership style labels,
Right.
they say we need to look at the actual specific behaviors that show those qualities.
So instead of asking, is this leader ethical, we should be asking, what are they doing that demonstrates their ethical compass?
Exactly. So, like, how does this leader react when someone on their team makes a mistake? Do they take responsibility? Do they try to sweep it under the rug? Do they use it as a teaching moment?
Right. Those actions tell us a lot more than, like, some vague label about their leadership style.
Way more. And that's the idea, moving from these fuzzy impressions to concrete evidence.
Okay, I like that. What else?
Another idea they have is to borrow some concepts from something called signaling theory.
Signaling theory.
Yeah, it's all about how individuals send out signals to communicate things about themselves, especially if those signals are what we call costly.
Costly signals. Okay, remind me what that means.
Sure. So imagine a gazelle, right? And a predator is nearby. That gazelle might jump really high in the air. It's not going to help it escape directly, but it does tell the predator, hey, I'm strong, I'm healthy, maybe not worth chasing.
Right.
It's costly because it takes energy. It might even attract more attention, but it sends a powerful message.
Okay, so how does that apply to leadership?
So think about it. A costly signal for a leader, that's a behavior that shows a real deep commitment to their values, even when it's hard or risky.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so imagine a leader who consistently calls out unethical stuff happening in their organization, even when it could hurt their own career.
Yeah, I see that.
That's costly. They're putting themselves on the line, but it shows they're not just talking, they're actually living those values.
Powerful example. So by looking for those costly signals, researchers can get a better sense of, is this leader truly authentic, ethical, whatever, or are they just putting on a show?
Exactly. It's about substance over style.
This is good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Any other recommendations for busting those causal illusions?
Yep, another important one. Study how followers evaluate leaders, but study it as an outcome in itself, not just as a stand-in for the leader's style.
So instead of just asking, how authentic is this leader, we ask, why do people think this leader is authentic?
Yes. Dig deeper into those perceptions, why people see leaders the way they do. That means looking at their experiences, biases, even cultural stuff.
Man, it's a complicated puzzle.
It is, but also really fascinating to try and untangle.
Okay, anything else from the research team? Lay it on me.
One last suggestion, and it's a big one. We need to start thinking about leadership styles as like configurations, not just isolated traits.
Configurations. Okay, what does that even mean?
It means recognizing that the magic, what makes a leader truly effective, it's likely the combination of specific behaviors, but also those behaviors in a certain context.
So it's not just a checklist of good leader traits. It's about how those traits work together in different situations.
Exactly. Like, think of baking a cake. You can have all the best ingredients, right? But if you don't mix them the right way or bake at the right temperature, it's a disaster.
Love that analogy. So we need to see the whole picture, the whole recipe for leadership, not just the individual ingredients.
That's the idea. And it means accepting that what works for one leader in one situation, it might not work somewhere else.
Man, this whole deep dive has made leadership seem so much more complex, you know?
It is
It's
complex.
not just about picking the right style or following some rules. It's about understanding ourselves, understanding the people we lead, and constantly adapting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This research, it's a call for, more careful, more rigorous, more realistic leadership research. And it reminds us that there are no easy answers, no magic formulas. But if we embrace that complexity, if we're willing to question our own assumptions and dig a little deeper, then we can move past those causal illusions and get a much better, more accurate understanding of what makes leadership truly effective.
Well, listeners, I hope this deep dive has been as thought-provoking for you as it has been for me. Big takeaway. Next time you hear someone making big promises about leadership, take a moment to consider where that's coming from, check your own biases, and don't be afraid to ask some tough questions.
And keep learning.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.